I made a mistake, but I'm prepared to pay whatever fine is necessary and move on. My time drives a company, jobs, and
Have you ever wondered what happens when a man who believes his wealth and status can buy anything suddenly hits an immovable wall of steel? In this courtroom, the gavel is not just a piece of wood used to maintain order, it is a psychological scalpel, and the hand holding it belongs to Judge Boyd. This is a man who does not operate on warm sympathy or hollow mercy. He operates on a sharp, cold, and undeniable truth. Today, we are going to witness a lesson in humility that the modern world has long forgotten. Walking into the courtroom is Julian Vane. He is a young, successful entrepreneur wearing a tailored suit that likely costs more than the annual income of a middle-class family. He stands there with a smirk, his eyes scanning the room, as if everyone else is just a meaningless statistic on a spreadsheet. Julian is charged with a severe speeding violation in a school zone, but his attitude is not one of remorse. It is one of pure defiance. He believes his presence here is nothing more than an annoying formality, a brief, irritating pause in his symphony of success. But Julian is wrong. He has never met Judge Boyd. Judge Boyd does not even look up when Julian approaches the stand. He sits there in total, absolute silence, slowly turning the pages of the case file. This is not ordinary silence. It is heavy, thick, and suffocating. This is the power silence technique that Boyd uses to peel away the layers of false confidence from his opponents. Julian begins to adjust his tie. That smirk starts to flicker and fade. He tries to break the tension by clearing his throat, but Judge Boyd does not acknowledge him. He is being treated like the file on the desk, a case to be analyzed, not a person to be feared. Look at Julian's body language through the lens of cold analysis. His feet are planted wide, his chin is tilted high, and his eyes are constantly searching for an audience. These are the classic signs of an oversized ego, a man who believes he is the center of the universe. He has no idea that in the eyes of Judge Boyd, this arrogance is not a shield, but a fatal flaw. When you believe you are above the law, you have already placed yourself in a corner with no escape. Arrogance creates blind spots, and Boyd is a master at finding them. Finally, Judge Boyd lifts his head. His gaze is not angry. It is empty and sharp like a surgical blade. He looks straight through Julian, through the expensive fabric of his suit, and through his prestigious bank accounts, to touch the core of the arrogance trembling inside. The atmosphere in the room shifts instantly. The air feels thinner. Mr. Vane, Boyd's voice rings out deep, cold, and stripped of all unnecessary emotion. I have read your file. I have watched the dashcam footage from the patrol car, and I see something in those frames that you have likely never seen in your own mirror. Do you want to know what it is? Julian freezes. The smirk is completely gone. He opens his mouth to mention his high-priced lawyer or his influential connections, but the sheer weight of Boyd's authority chokes the words in his throat. A cold shiver begins to crawl up the spine of the arrogant defendant. He realizes, perhaps for the first time in his life, that his money has no pulse here. The psychological battle has begun, and Julian Vane has no idea he lost the war the very moment he stepped into this room. Julian Vane shifts his weight. The silence was working, but now that Judge Boyd has spoken, Julian feels a desperate need to reclaim the alpha position in the room. He looks toward his high-priced attorney, a man whose hourly rate could pay a month's mortgage for the court clerk, but the lawyer remains silent. He knows better than to interrupt Boyd when the trap is being set. Julian clears his throat, attempting to project the voice of a man used to giving orders in boardrooms. Your Honor, Julian begins, his tone bordering on patronizing. I understand the technical violation, but you must realize, I manage a firm with over 200 employees. I was late for a venture capital meeting that determines the livelihoods of those people. My time is not just my own, it's an economic driver. I'm happy to pay the maximum fine and move on. Let's not waste the court's valuable time over a simple lapse in judgment. Judge Boyd leans back slightly. He doesn't look impressed. In fact, he looks clinical, like a scientist observing a particularly transparent specimen under a microscope. He watches Julian's hands. Julian is gripping the edge of the podium, his knuckles white, a physical manifestation of the internal panic he's trying to hide behind his economic driver's speech. In the world of power analysis, this is what we call the wealth shield. Julian is trying to use his net worth as a get out of jail free card, believing that his importance outweighs the safety of the public. Mr. Vane, Boyd's voice cuts through the air, colder than before. You speak of time as if you are the only one who owns it. You speak of your economic driver as if it grants you a license to endanger the lives of those who will never see your boardroom. Do you know what the speed limit is on Broad Street at 8:15 the morning? Julian stammers. I believe it's 25. It is 20, Mr. Vane, 20 miles per hour, because at 8:15 a.m., that street is filled with children whose only economic contribution is the lunch money in their backpacks. The radar clocked you at 68. 68 in a 20. Boyd pauses, letting that number hang in the air like a guillotine blade. At 68 miles per hour, your luxury vehicle isn't a status symbol. It is a 2-ton projectile. If a 7-year-old had stepped off that curb, your venture capital meeting would have been a crime scene investigation. Julian tries to intervene, his face reddening. But nobody was hurt, Your Honor. It's a victimless hypothetical. Silence, Boyd says. It isn't a shout. It's a command so absolute that the entire gallery stops breathing. In this room, the only victimless thing I see is your conscience. You didn't slow down because you valued life. You didn't slow down because you felt the rules didn't apply to a man of your stature. You saw the yellow lights flashing. You saw the crossing guard. And you decided that your schedule was worth more than their survival. Boyd picks up a pen and circles a figure in the file. He isn't looking at the fine amount. He is looking at Julian's prior record, 3 other high-speed violations, all dismissed by expensive lawyers in other jurisdictions. But the Boyd protocol is different. Here, wealth isn't an asset, it's an aggravating factor. If you have the resources to know better, you have the responsibility to do better. Julian's arrogance is beginning to crack. The sweat on his forehead is starting to ruin the finish of his expensive hairstyling. He is realizing that for the first time in his life, he cannot buy his way out of the truth. The high-priced defense attorney finally senses the shift in the room's oxygen. He attempts to stand, adjusting his silver-rimmed glasses, preparing to launch into a procedural objection to shield his client from Judge Boyd's cold, psychological dissection. But before he can utter a single objection, Boyd raises one finger. It is a small gesture, but it carries the weight of a closing prison door. The attorney sits back down. In this theater of justice, there is only one director, and he wears the black robe. Judge Boyd turns his attention back to the thick manila folder on his desk. He begins to read aloud not the charges, but the history. February 2024, dismissed. November 2023, reduced to a non-moving violation. June 2023, prayer for judgment continued. Boyd looks over the top of his glasses at Julian. You've been very busy, Mr. Vane. Or rather, your bank account has been very busy scrubbing your reputation clean. You seem to believe that laws are merely suggestions for people who can afford the subscription fee of a legal defense team. Let's analyze Julian's reaction here. This is the moment where the physiognomy of defeat begins to manifest. Julian's jaw, once set in a hard line of defiance, is now working rhythmically, a sign of intense, suppressed aggression and growing anxiety. His eyes, which previously roamed the room looking for admirers, are now glued to the floor. He is experiencing what we call status shock. In his world, a check solves the problem. In Boyd's world, a check is just a piece of paper that proves you haven't learned a thing in 30 years. You told this court your time is an economic driver, Boyd continues, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. But looking at this record, I see a man who is driving toward a catastrophe. You aren't late for meetings, Mr. Vane. You are addicted to the feeling of being untouchable. You drive 68 in a school zone not because you're busy, but because you want to see if the world has the courage to stop you. Julian finally breaks his silence, his voice cracking slightly, betraying the alpha image he spent millions to cultivate. Your Honor, I've donated hundreds of thousands to local charities. I've built playgrounds in this city. I'm a good man who made a mistake under pressure. This is a classic moral licensing trap. Julian believes that buying a playground gives him the right to endanger the children playing on it. It's a twisted logic that Judge Boyd has seen 1,000 times in 40 years on the bench. Boyd doesn't blink. He doesn't offer a nod of appreciation for the donations. Instead, he leans forward, his shadow falling over Julian like a dark omen. Charity is what you do when the world is watching, Mr. Vane, Boyd says, each word hitting like a hammer. Character is what you do when you're behind the wheel of a 600 horsepower machine and you think no one can catch you. You didn't build those playgrounds out of the goodness of your heart. You built them as indulgences to buy your way out of your own arrogance. But today, the currency has changed. Your donations don't spend here. Your influence doesn't reach this bench. Today, you are just a man who almost killed a child because he thought he was too important to follow a sign. The mask has not just slipped, it has shattered. Julian Vane stands in the center of the courtroom, stripped of his corporate titles and his charitable shield. He is finally seeing the Boyd Protocol in full effect. The higher you climb on the ladder of arrogance, the harder the floor feels when you finally fall. The defense attorney stands once more, his voice projecting a forced confidence that everyone in the room knows is hollow. Your Honor, he says, smoothing the front of his bespoke blazer. While the speed was indeed high, we must look at the mechanical excellence of my client's vehicle. It is equipped with the world's most advanced ceramic braking system. The actual risk was mitigated by technology. Mr. Vane was in full control at all times. Judge Boyd doesn't interrupt. He simply watches the attorney, then shifts his gaze to Julian. This is a classic Boyd trap. He allows the defense to dig their own grave with their own logic. He waits for the silence to become uncomfortable before he speaks, his voice low and clinical, like a surgeon explaining a terminal diagnosis. Mechanical excellence, Boyd repeats, the words sounding like ice cubes rattling in a glass. A fascinating argument. Counsel, but tell me, does your client's ceramic braking system also rewrite the laws of physics? Does it eliminate the half second it takes for a human brain to process a child darting into the street? Does it negate the kinetic energy of 5,000 pounds of metal moving at 100 feet per second? Boyd leans forward, his eyes locking onto Julian's. Let's do some math, Mr. Vane. Since you're a man of business, you must appreciate numbers. At 68 miles per hour, you are traveling at roughly 100 feet every single second. The average reaction time for a surprise driver is 1.5 seconds. That means before your advanced brakes even touch the rotors, you would have traveled 150 feet. That is half a football field, Mr. Vane. You would have been through the crosswalk, over the curb, and into the school's front doors before you even realized you had hit something. Take a close look at Julian Vane's face right now. This is the anatomy of realization. The blood has completely drained from his cheeks. His eyes are wide, fixed on the wooden bench, as if he can see the phantom images of the children he almost struck. The alpha posturing has collapsed. His shoulders are slumped, and his hands are no longer gripping the podium. They are trembling. He isn't being judged by a man. He is being judged by the cold, hard reality of the universe. You weren't in control, Mr. Vane, Boyd continues, his voice gaining a terrifying resonance. You were a passenger in a tragedy that simply hadn't happened yet. You entrusted the lives of innocent children to your mechanical excellence because you were too arrogant to trust the speed limit. You treated that school zone like a private racetrack because you thought your bank account acted as a shock absorber for the law. The attorney tries to interject. Your Honor, the statute for a first-time offender in this jurisdiction usually results in, this is not a usual day, and you are not in a usual court, Boyd snaps. The first time he has shown a spark of fire, you are in my court. And in my court, the law isn't a commodity you trade, it is a shield for the powerless. You've spent your career finding loopholes for men like Mr. Vane, allowing their arrogance to grow until it becomes lethal. Well, counsel, the loophole is closed. The exit ramp is blocked. Today, your client isn't a pillar of the community. He is a defendant who is about to learn that his importance is exactly zero when measured against the safety of a single child. Julian's breath is coming in short, shallow bursts. He is finally feeling the weight of the robe. He is finally feeling the gravity of a man who cannot be bought, intimidated, or impressed. The lesson in humility has moved past the introductory phase. Now, it's about to get painful. The air in the courtroom has grown heavy, almost stagnant. Julian Vane, a man who began this session as a towering figure of industry, now seems smaller. His expensive Italian wool suit, once a symbol of his invincibility, now appears to be a burden he is struggling to carry. This is the visual decay of arrogance. When the external validation of wealth is stripped away by a superior authority, the physical body begins to reflect the internal chaos. Julian's breathing is audible now, a rhythmic, shallow sound that betrays a nervous system in full retreat. Judge Boyd remains perfectly still. He is not a man who needs to move to exert pressure. His power is stationary. He reaches for a small remote on his desk, and a screen on the wall flickers to life. It doesn't show the dashcam footage again. Instead, it shows a simple, high-resolution photo of a child's bicycle, twisted into a shape that no longer resembles a machine. It is a piece of evidence from a different case, years old, but its presence here is a calculated strike by Boyd. "Mr. Vane," Boyd begins, his voice now a low, resonant hum that vibrates through the floorboards. "You spent 20 minutes telling me about your venture capital meetings. You spent 10 minutes telling me about the playgrounds you've funded. Now, I want you to spend 60 seconds looking at that screen. That is what 68 miles per hour looks like when it meets something that doesn't have a ceramic braking system. That is what happens when arrogance collides with innocence." Julian tries to look away, but Boyd's voice anchors him. "Look at it, Julian. In your world, a mistake is a line item on a profit and loss statement. You write a check, you fire a manager, and the problem vanishes. But in my world, there is no undo button. There is no bankruptcy court for a broken spine. There is no merger that can bring back a heartbeat." Analyze Julian's reaction carefully. His head is bowed, his eyes fixed on the twisted metal on the screen. This is the primal realignment. For the first time in his adult life, Julian is being forced to confront the fact that he is not a god, but a biological entity capable of causing irreversible destruction. The moral licensing he tried to use earlier, the idea that his good deeds bought him a pass for his bad ones, is evaporating. Boyd is using the Boyd protocol of extreme reality to bridge the gap between Julian's boardrooms and the pavement of Broad Street. "You think you're a leader," Boyd continues, his tone devoid of any sympathy. "But a leader understands that his greatest responsibility is the protection of the vulnerable. You didn't lead that morning, Mr. Vane. You hunted. You turned a public road into a kill zone because you were too proud to be inconvenienced by a school bus. You weren't driving to a meeting, you were driving to an altar where you were prepared to sacrifice anyone in your way to satisfy your own ego." The defense attorney attempts to whisper something to his client, perhaps trying to coach a final plea, but Julian brushes him away. The attorney's influence has expired. The money has lost its voice. Julian is standing in the cold, bright light of a truth he cannot spin. He is no longer a CEO. He is a human being who is finally beginning to understand the weight of the robe he is standing before. Boyd turns off the screen. The sudden darkness in the room feels even more oppressive than the image. "You came here today, expecting a transaction, Mr. Vane. You thought you could trade a small portion of your wealth for your freedom to continue being reckless. But I don't deal in currency. I deal in character. And right now, yours is in a state of total insolvency." Julian Vane is no longer looking at the bench. He is looking at his own hands, resting trembling on the mahogany podium. This is the physiognomy of submission. The tension in his jaw has transitioned into a slight, uncontrollable quiver. In the high-stakes world of venture capital, Julian is the one who dictates terms. But here, in the cold vacuum of Judge Boyd's courtroom, he is discovering that his terms don't exist. He is experiencing identity liquidation, the process where a man realizes that without his titles, his cars, and his assistants, he is remarkably hollow. Judge Boyd watches this transformation with the detached interest of an architect inspecting a failed foundation. He doesn't move. He doesn't need to. The silence he has curated is doing the heavy lifting. When he finally speaks, his voice is not a roar, but a whisper that carries the weight of a landslide. "You mentioned your 200 employees earlier, Mr. Vane," Boyd says, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You used them as a human shield to justify your recklessness. You suggested that because you provide livelihoods, you should be granted a different set of physics on the road. But let's analyze the social contract you've actually signed. In my view, the more you have, the more you owe. The The higher your status, the more impeccable your conduct must be. You don't get a discount on the law because you're successful. You get a premium on the responsibility. Julian tries to find his voice. It comes out thin and brittle. I've always tried to be a leader, Your Honor. A leader? Boyd repeats, the word dripping with clinical irony. A leader protects the pack. A leader doesn't drive through a school zone at 68 miles per hour because his time is more valuable than the lives of the children of his own employees. That's not leadership, Julian. That's predatory arrogance. It's the belief that your shadow is more important than someone else's sunlight. You didn't see those children as people. You saw them as obstacles to your next win. Analyze the shift in the courtroom's atmosphere. The defense attorney has completely retreated. He is now checking his watch, mentally distancing himself from the wreckage of his client's ego. He knows that the Boyd protocol has reached the point of no return. Julian is now standing in the audit of the soul. I want you to answer a question, Mr. Vane. Boyd leans forward, his presence filling the gap between the bench and the stand. And I want you to answer it as a man, not a CEO. If you were stripped of your firm today, if the bank accounts were frozen, the cars repossessed, and the tailored suits taken away, who would be standing in that box? Would there be a man of character left, or just a collection of expensive receipts? Julian is silent. The question is a surgical strike to the core of his existence. This is the existential pivot. He has spent a decade building a skyscraper of ego, and Boyd has just pointed out that it was built on sand. The humility lesson is no longer about a speeding ticket. It is about the fundamental definition of a man's worth. The tragedy of your life, Julian, Boyd says, his voice softening just enough to be terrifying, is that you think your wealth makes you more than others. In reality, it has made you less. It has insulated you from the consequences that keep ordinary people grounded. It has allowed you to become a danger to the very community that made your success possible. You aren't a driver of the economy today. You are a debtor. And the debt you owe Broad Street cannot be paid with a wire transfer. Julian's head remains bowed. The arrogance hasn't just been destroyed. It has been atomized. He is finally ready to hear the sentence. Not because he wants it over with, but because he finally understands that he deserves it. The courtroom is no longer a hall of debate. It has become a sanctuary of silence. Julian Vane is no longer a man of influence. He is a lesson in the making. He stands there, his head bowed so low that he seems to be searching for his lost pride on the polished floorboards. This is the post-crisis stillness. In this state, the defendant has moved past the stage of anger and bargaining and has entered the stage of absolute vulnerability. For the first time, Julian isn't thinking about his venture capital meeting. He is thinking about the sound of his own heartbeat in a room that is judging his very soul. Judge Boyd watches him. He doesn't look satisfied. Justice is a clinical necessity for Boyd, not an emotional release. He picks up a small, brass-edged gavel, but he doesn't strike it yet. He merely holds it, letting Julian feel the weight of the authority that is about to descend. This is the Boyd protocol of imminent consequence. Mr. Vane. Boyd's voice is soft now, which makes it infinitely more terrifying. It is the voice of a man who has already made his decision and is now simply explaining the why before the what. You came here today thinking you were the predator. You thought your money was the ultimate weapon, but you forgot the oldest law in this country, the law of reciprocity. You took safety away from that school zone, and in return, the law must take something away from you. Not because we want your money, but because we need to remind you that you are human. Analyze the visual cues of this moment. The defense attorney has literally taken a step back, physically separating himself from the defendant. He is no longer a shield. He is a spectator. Julian is isolated. In the world of power analysis, this is the social death that precedes a legal judgment. Julian has been stripped of his corporate identity, his charitable facade, and now his legal support. He is standing naked before the truth. I'm looking at your hands, Julian, Boyd says, his eyes like two cold lanterns. They're shaking. Good. That tremor is the first honest thing you've brought into this courtroom today. It means you finally understand that there is a power in this world that doesn't care about your net worth. There is a justice that cannot be bribed with a playground donation or silenced with a high-priced lawyer. Boyd leans back. the shadows of the bench playing across his face. You asked to pay the maximum fine and move on. You wanted to treat the lives of those children as a transaction. Well, Julian, I don't accept your currency. The price for 68 in a school zone isn't a check, it's a transformation. You're going to leave this room today feeling lighter, not because you've settled your debt, but because I am going to remove the one thing that has poisoned your character for the last decade. Julian looks up, fear flickering in his eyes. This is the weight of terror. He expects a jail sentence, a massive fine, or a permanent loss of his license. But Boyd's punishments are never just about the statute. They are about the soul. You think you are above the community, Mr. Vane. So, I am going to place you right in the middle of it. I'm not just going to fine you. I'm going to make you see the world through the eyes of the people you treated as obstacles. Boyd leans forward, the gavel hovering inches above the wood. The lesson is almost over, Julian, but the lifelong work of becoming a human being is just about to begin. The silence in the courtroom has reached its terminal point. Julian Vane stands motionless, a hollowed-out version of the man who walked in an hour ago. He isn't looking for a loophole anymore. He isn't looking at his lawyer. He is looking at the gavel in Judge Boyd's hand, realizing that his entire life's philosophy, the belief that everything has a price tag, is about to be dismantled. Judge Boyd adjusts his robe, a final, cold alignment of his authority. Mr. Vane, you asked for the maximum fine. You wanted to settle this with your checkbook. Very well. I will grant you that request. I am imposing the maximum financial penalty allowed by law, $5,000 plus court costs. To you, that is a rounding error. It's a dinner in Manhattan. It's meaningless. Boyd pauses, his eyes locking onto Julian's with a predatory focus. But as I told you, I don't deal in currency. I deal in character. Therefore, I am revoking your driver's license for a period of 1 year, effective immediately. Your ceramic brakes will be staying in your garage, but even that is not the sentence. That is merely the inconvenience. Julian's breath catches. He waits for the Boyd protocol to deliver the final strike. In addition to the fine and the suspension, Boyd continues, his voice echoing like a tolling bell. You are hereby ordered to complete 500 hours of community service, but you won't be picking up trash on the highway where no one can see you. You will be serving as a voluntary crossing guard at the very school zone where you were clocked at 68 miles per hour. Every morning at 7:30 a.m. and every afternoon at 3 p.m., you will wear a neon vest. You will hold a stop sign, and you will stand on that curb, protecting the children you previously treated as obstacles. Analyze Julian's face in this moment. This is the total ego death. The billionaire entrepreneur, the economic driver, is being forced into the most humble position imaginable. He is being moved from the driver's seat of power to the sidewalk of service. Boyd has stripped away the suit and replaced it with a safety vest. I want you to feel the wind of the cars as they pass you, Julian, Boyd says, his voice dropping to a whisper that fills the room. I want you to feel the vulnerability of a 7-year-old child as a 5,000-pound machine speeds toward them. I want you to spend 500 hours being the shield you almost shattered. If you miss a single morning, if you are 1 minute late for your shift, I will vacate this order and you will serve 1 year in the county jail. Do you understand? Julian swallows hard, his voice barely audible. Yes, Your Honor. Good, Boyd says. He raises the gavel and brings it down a single, sharp crack that sounds like a closing door. Case dismissed. Get out of my court and find your humanity on that crosswalk. Judge Boyd doesn't watch him leave. He immediately looks down at the next file, his emotional labor complete. Julian Vane turns and walks slowly toward the exit. No longer an alpha, no longer a titan. He is just a man who has finally learned that true power isn't about how fast you go, but who you protect along the way. Justice isn't always about the bars of a cell. Sometimes the greatest prison is being forced to look in the mirror until you finally see the person you're supposed to be. Today, Judge Boyd didn't just punish a speeder. He performed a public service for the soul of a city.